Transmitting to you from Old Heart Radio.
It's another episode of Intune. I'm
Hey
here with
guys.
Avi. This is Lucas.
Hi.
And we're still zooming, sadly. Someday we'll actually record one of these together, but not quite yet. That'd be. I await that day.
Yes, we all await that day somewhere on the horizon.
I know life's been good.
Oh yeah,
The day to day.
just making coffees here.
Amen. That's at least you're working.
Yeah.
I can speak for our other host Jared. That he's dying. we're running out of things to do unless I'm in school, but even then, I mean, damn, there's nothing going on.
Well, it gives us more time to listen to good music, right?
Oh yeah. So wow, good segue. Sweet.
Definitely wasn't
the so how we're gonna be running the show is we're testing. We're running through some little things. But we're gonna be sending each other music week by week. So this week I sent Avi a handful of albums. Next week he'll send me a handful of albums, and so on and so forth. So to start off, "Mood" by Mild Minds. How do you feel about that? Very electronic. Almost a bit of it gets dancey, but then and a bit of it gets almost like ambient. So
yeah, definitely. Overall, I dig it a lot. I think that it does have a lot of diversity in terms of like tempo. Like you were saying, some of it's very ambient. Other times it's very like, you can definitely like almost like dance to it.
Yeah.
It has a very like uplifting sound to it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And the vocals I also wanted to focus on, I really liked, were very kind of like warm vocals. Some of it almost sounded like Kevin Parker, his vocals with Tame Impala. But yeah, so overall it was just the sound. Those are kind of like the traits and like attributes that I picked up from it, which I really appreciated.
Were there any songs in particular that you really liked?
Yeah, I liked kind of the opening to the album, which the songs Movements and Embracer.
Yeah.
It just was like a very powerful opening.
Yeah, Embracer is a sweet song. I think that's one of my favorite songs by him. Yeah. About a year ago or so, Mild Minds he made a name for himself when he released. He was before this. He was a producer, and this is his first real like solo work. But about a year ago, he released "Swim," and that's the song that really gave him a spike. And a remix for it actually got nominated for a Grammy.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and the remix was done by another artist called Ford, which you'll definitely hear some of in the future because I'm a huge fan. But yeah, I mean, when this album came out, and I actually bought this on a record too, and it totally changes it. The analog sound of it really opens up in that form. But like listening to this album, number one, like great for going on a run. This is perfect workout music. And like specifically like Dopamine, and I think Dopamine and Destinations for me, they both have this cool like arpeggiating synth going up and down, and gives it a bit more depth, and it's very wavy. And a lot of the sounds he uses are really round, and it has like that depth of sound that you get from a full band or from a handful of chords being played at the same time, you know?
Yeah, I think that that's one of his strong suits, because one of my only critiques of the album would be that some parts definitely like kind of feel a little repetitive to me, just because I'm not used to this sort of genre as much. But he kind of counters that at times with like what you were saying with the arpeggiation and his just what he does with the sound. And I didn't really realize that it was just one person until, kind of doing a little bit of research on the album, and listening through some of the songs. That's a really cool thing, that you can kind of like almost mask yourself as, a bigger band you really are.
Oop, technical difficulties.
Backtrack.
Just right after you started talking about the arpeggiation and masking yourself as a larger.
Okay, yeah.
Hey,
So
we're gonna leave it in. We're gonna leave it in. That's the old heart radio way.
that's great. I love that. Okay, but yeah, no. So I mean, he uses the name Mild Minds, which is like that seems like a band name. It doesn't seem like one person. So so that's his strong suit. I feel is that he's able to kind of mask himself as a full band from all of the ways that he manipulates the sound. So that's cool.
It almost is like, and this is something that I feel like applies to Mild Minds, applies to Ford, who I just mentioned, and like Odessa and Flume. It's almost like conducting an orchestra, but you don't have to rely on any other people. Like everything is just at your fingertips. And just like with the press of a button, with like the setup and the laying out of a chord, you have all that at your fingertips. And I feel like it lends to a kind of sound that's pretty unique. And I feel like Mild Minds capitalizes on it really well. And
have you seen Mild Minds live?
I've not. He went on tour with some musicians that I liked, but I didn't get a chance to go and see him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can imagine it would be like, I'm pretty sure he's opening for a bunch of people at this point. He's still a pretty small artist. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I only came across him initially because I follow the music label that he gets distributed by on Instagram. So
yeah, I was going to say he's on Foreign Family Collective, which is the same label that Odessa's on. Is that right?
Yeah, it's Odessa's label. They actually they're the guys that run it. So like there's a handful of artists I like that have been picked up off that, and it'd be interesting to talk at some point about the labels that we really like. Because, I feel like that brings together a lot of people with similar minds and similar kinds of music. Mm-hmm. And actually, when you said that his music was a bit samey, as somebody that is familiar with like this like genre and this style, it totally is. Like that is probably my one criticism as well. That there are a few songs in the album that you're like, a couple songs. I think there's 8 songs overall, and maybe 2 of them you're just like, like these could have been cut. They can just turn it into like an EP or like a short album.
I agree. Mm-hmm.
While that's not a bad thing overall, like that's to me like nitpicking on my end.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like if you're in the mood that it's supposed to be setting you in, that might not have the same effect. It might be like it might feel better to kind of like stay in that zone for a little bit longer, which is maybe why he does some of the more repetitive segments. Yeah.
I feel like to a lesser regard than what we talked about last week, like with the Parcels album, which we'll talk more about later, but like it flows together really well, like it feels cohesive. There's no, like the sameness comes with the theme being consistent,
Right.
So yeah, that's Mild Minds. I'm glad you liked it overall. He has like another EP from about a year ago that you should check out. That's just called Swim. And it's Swim, which is on this album, and then 2 other songs that he didn't release on the album.
Cool.
So that's he's a sweet up and coming artist. So to your listener as well, if you haven't checked out Mild Minds, do it. He deserves support. He's a great instrumentalist. Mm-hmm. So then I also sent you 2 albums, and these are like weirdly related. I sent you Metronomy Forever and Oscar Cash Forever. So for those that aren't familiar, Metronomy, they're like a sort of like synth pop, indie pop band that has like a weird amount of variety in their discography, from like synthy to like acoustic to being a bit like punky at some points. And they released Metronomy Forever about 6 months ago. And their keyboard player, Oscar Cash, released his own album of remixed versions of the given songs. And it's very much like jazzy and a different take on all that. While you can still hear some of the musical elements that are the backbones of the other songs, you get a lot of, it's a very different vibe. So I want to run those off of you, see which one you preferred, because they are sort of like 2 sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I, upon listening to both of them, preferred actually Oscar Cash Forever as opposed to Metronomy Forever. Oscar Cash Forever is going to be more instrument based, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I think that there are no vocals on this album.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. I kind of had a little bit of a weird vibe with Metronomy Forever. I was familiar with Metronomy a little bit through one of their albums from about 10 years ago, the English Riviera, which is a really, really, really good album, and I love it.
Like I'm pretty sure like if you go on Spotify, their top songs are still songs off that album.
Yeah.
Like it's The Bay and the Look are I think their top songs, which that album is just phenomenal in the first place. That's one of my favorite albums of the 2010s.
Yeah, for sure. And so that was my only access point with Metronomy. So listening to Metronomy Forever, I was kind of anticipating a similar sound, but it's pretty different in my opinion. This one is a little bit more like sardonic. Like it's a little more.
Oh, good word.
Yeah,
that's a good description.
I mean, it's like it's almost like sarcastic and cynical overall, like with the lyrics, and not only just the lyrics, but with the instrumentation and everything, and just kind of like the layout of the album. It all seemed, and to me, I don't know, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But I'm curious to hear why you really love this album.
Well, I mean, it comes from a weird place for me because like I've kept up with Metronomy to some regard, and they've progressively evolved over the last decade. And like you still get the bones of what the English Riviera did great. But then like on their subsequent albums, like the one that comes to mind most is Love Letters from 2016, I want to say. That album is very it leans a bit more into the synth stuff, and I'm pretty sure for that entire album they didn't have a drummer. They were just using drum machines. So like they're like going into Metronomy Forever, I was aware that there's probably going to be a dramatic change in sound. But like I even was surprised by sort of like specifically with songs like Lately, and like there's a lot of like weird tonality all over this album. Like the like synth pop of like Salty Caramel Ice Cream. Lately's a punk song. And then they have another song called Lately Going Spare later in the album that's like a weirdly like ethereal, bright poppy song. And like it jumps from place to place. I sort of love that because I'm a big Gorillaz fan. And that's like the Gorillaz' bread and butter. They never latch themselves to a specific genre. So like I'm a big fan of Metronomy. I've been a big fan of Metronomy for a while. I want to watch them live, and it was a phenomenal concert. But then at the same time, I can totally see why you wouldn't like that. And that's also why I sent these to you. I sort of anticipated you liking Oscar Cash Forever a bit more, just because it is more laid back. It is more, I won't say musically competent, but it has more of a depth and more of a consistency of theme and overall feel, you know?
It's a little more serious.
Totally. Like you can tell that Oscar Cash really has a grasp on the fundamentals of music making. Yeah,
which to me is important, and I gravitate a little more towards that. However, what we were kind of talking about before we started recording is that like this Metronomy Forever album, if you're into Metronomy and you're familiar with their music, you're probably going to love this. However, if you're not really familiar with their music, try getting into their other albums first, which I'm excited to do. I want to hear, especially because you're saying that their discography is pretty diverse. And then once you're kind of familiar with them, if you're really into those albums, you probably will have a better appreciation for Metronomy Forever.
Yeah. It's a progression akin to like Tame Impala, you know? Like he started off super acoustic, and now with the slow rush, we're getting like deep white synths and like funk from his like psychedelic origins. It's like there's a progression that some artists take, and I can totally see like being familiar with one end of the spectrum, diving in on, and they're completely different at this point. It can rub people the wrong way, especially, and it can definitely alienate people. While like change is good, dramatic change can like ruin a base, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
It's so specifically with Oscar Cash, do you have any songs that stood out to you? These for me, his remix of The Light, it's called Glided Trumpet. That's my favorite song.
That was one of two that I wrote down as my favorites. That one I really liked. I also really liked Mellow Brass, which is his remix of the, I guess, two songs, Lately and With Sande. Both of those were just really very what's the word, like, it's like, I'm about to use like a coffee description. Very full body. Like,
hey, it works though. It makes sense. Feels like they're well realized songs.
Well,
actually, that's a criticism I have for Metronomy Forever, is that some of the songs on that album feel half-baked. You know, it's a long album, and I feel like you cut out like 4 songs versus Oscar Cash. I mean, he had the benefit of hindsight of actively collaborating with Metronomy to make that album, and then taking the pieces that he had fully fleshed out ideas with, committing to that.
That was very cool. I am curious about the redundancy in Metronomy Forever, like with some of the song titles. Like, I know. At least
Insecurity.
Yeah, Insecurity. There's Lately, and then Lately, parentheses Going Spare, and then there's Wedding and Wedding Bells. Like, there's lots of, I'm curious about that. Why the band decided to.
In watching some interviews with those guys, they sort of wanted to talk about, or the overall theme of the album is like the cycle of style, you know? Like stylistically, and how they wrote that album, like Lately and Wedding Bells in particular, they resemble like 90s rock, and how they wanted, and like all that's coming back now, whether it's in fashion or music. Like a few years ago, like Stranger Things came out. Everybody was like, the 80s is great. And now we're getting into the 90s and like going up. My mom, who grew up through the grunge era in like the 80s and 90s in Seattle, she's pissed off now because she's like, this is bullshit. Everybody's going back to this style. I thought this was long gone. Whether it's in music, whether it's in fashion, whether it's in like how people consume media. Supposedly that was their idea for the album. It's just this never-ending cycle of, I won't say not unoriginal thoughts, but like new perspectives on unoriginal thoughts.
That's very fascinating. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I like I said, I'm a fan of it, but it's definitely got its holes. And do you have any songs that stuck out to you on Metronomy Forever as being good? Or
yes.
were you just like, fuck this?
No, it was not. Overall, I didn't love the album, but a couple songs did stand out to me. Lying Low and Miracle Rooftop.
Really?
Yeah.
So the completely instrumental songs.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So,
Lying Low has like a vocal sample that's just like the dude super close to the mic, like whoop.
I'm gonna be honest here. I really am not a big fan of the guy's voice in Metronomy, and that's probably one of the reasons why I was kind of turned off by the album. Maybe I don't know. Sometimes I have a tendency to be picky about like people's voices, which is a bad thing. But I don't know. That's funny. I didn't realize those two songs were the instrumentals. But,
well, I can't blame you though, because the dude's voice gets a bit whiny at some points. He's got that. It sounds like he goes for a falsetto sometimes and then like misses it. Like
it's complementary to their like instruments. You know, it fits their sound, which is why they're so successful.
Yeah, but they're a bit rough on the edges, I guess.
Mm-hmm, right.
It's one of it's complementary, but then like vocals is such like a weird ebb and flow stylistically. It either meshes. Mm-hmm. Even if it meshes or it doesn't, sometimes it's just like I can't get behind this. It's like me and Billie Eilish. Mm-hmm. Like not to skew too far away from the subject matter, but like I think her production's phenomenal, and I think her music's really well made. But I don't really like it because of her voice. Like sure. I don't like the like low, not low, it's just that like faint voice.
Yeah.
Like while I can understand why people like it, I just can't do that. So it's the same type of deal. It's just sort of the one little thing. So so Metronomy Forever. I highly recommend, if you like Avi said, if you want to check that out, I would like probably go back and listen to their other stuff first. Listen to it in like a somewhat chronological order. Mm-hmm. It'll definitely make it more interesting. But like specifically for me, the English Riviera and Love Letters are probably my favorite albums from them. Mm-hmm. So after talking last week, you dived into Parcels.
Oh yeah,
and
I dived in. All right,
we wanted to talk about this. Yes. just like briefly here.
Yeah. So basically, if you haven't listened to our last episode, which is our first one together, we talked about Parcels and their EP that they released a few weeks ago, which is kind of like a little sample of a whole live album that they recorded in studio in Germany. Well, they just released the full live album days ago, and on YouTube you can it's not just audio, it's like you can watch them perform it in the studio. It's really cool. But I listened through the whole thing. It's like over an hour long, and it's so good. You get to actually kind of see them in their element,
which before this quickly they look like caricatures of the Beatles, like a few of them.
They do. The main guy with the mustache, I don't know his name, he plays the lead guitar and things.
Yeah,
he looks like George Harrison, like
absolutely
100%. It's funny looking at the YouTube comments of that, because a lot of people were like, this is what would happen if the Beatles and Daft Punk were to have a baby.
So Parcels is on Daft Punk's label.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they have another song. Actually, I think they performed it in that. Did you watch the whole video?
Yes.
So Overnight, that song they wrote it and produced it with Daft Punk.
Oh, that's wild. That's cool.
So yeah, it's one of those like you totally pick up on it. They just sort of have that same sort of style, like Random Access Memories, right?
Yeah. So there was one part of that live album which I mentioned to you. I'm trying to find which song it was, but there's a really cool moment between the two guitarists.
Oh, it's from Lighten Up.
Lighten Up. Okay, yeah. Where the two guitarists kind of they both do a solo, but it's like a call and response solo. So like one guitarist will play a little bit, and then the other guitarist will like will take it and do his own thing, and they do it back and forth a little bit, and then they end up like meshing it together in a really, really beautiful way.
Yeah. Have you listened to the original version of that song?
Ooh, maybe.
It's on their self-titled album, and like that is completely improvised. Like that part, it's not in the song. They just had a little break in the song and just did a little riff together.
Knowing that makes it even more just fantastic. So,
and if you're listening to this and you don't quite understand if like music theory and the fundamentals of like playing an instrument, the fundamentals of playing with other people, it doesn't sound like much, but like how good it was, it's like jaw dropping. It just is so smooth.
Mm-hmm.
You thought it was planned. Like that's.
I did think it was planned. I didn't think that you could do something that kind of minute and that specific improvised. Like that is to me as a guitarist, like that is insane.
Yeah.
It seemed like they had planned that. But yeah, so that I wanted to return to that after talking about it last week, because the EP is a segment from that actual whole live show.
It's like an extended version of I Know How I Feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So definitely recommend that to all the listeners. I've been listening to that a lot this past week. It's become a very good album to listen to.
Oh yeah, and so that video, it's about an hour long. It's on their YouTube channel. It's just Parcels on YouTube. Totally worth checking out. And like with their music, you can just put it on in the background. It's like if you want to pay attention to it, go ahead. You're all the better for it. It's super satisfying to like deeply listen to. But you can also just listen to it while doing other stuff. It's very easy listening, and but it's well done. So yeah, Parcels is fucking awesome. My little sister introduced me to that band about like a year ago at this point. Mm-hmm. And we went and watched them about a year ago as well. And like they put on a wicked show. And also to recommend this to you, their opener might have been the funniest shit I've ever seen. Their opener is called the Penthouse Boys.
Oh, you're telling me about this, yes.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the Penthouse Boys, and what it's like, look up to Avi and the listener, look up the Penthouse Boys on YouTube because you'll find the funniest shit. I swear to God, it's amazing. It's like a dude on a sampler and a dude like mumbling into a microphone. And I watched that, and I just thought like my girlfriend's next to me, and like everyone's jaw hit the floor in the audience, and everyone sort of looked at each other, and my girlfriend leaned to me and was just like, if these guys are touring with Parcels, you can be a professional musician. like they were such shit. It was amazing, but
wow.
But like the most memorable type of garbage.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I've seen some really, really bad openers in my day, and I don't know what's ever happened to them, but I'm always kind of surprised when I see I mean, I hate to say like objectively bad, but like I've seen some like not
like
so
mediocre.
Great, like mediocre bands touring with like really incredible bands.
That's like I will say I will fuck around and joke about the Penthouse Boys, but they were bad, and because they were bad, they were memorable. But there was a band that toured with Metronomy when I went and watched them recently. Once they were called Bodega, and they were the embodiment of mediocre. It sounded like they were doing Ramones covers, but like in a like the most unoriginal style possible. And what's actually funny,
something like that, you better do it good.
What's funny is that the next day I was talking shit about them at work, and Spencer Solt, good old Generifus himself, came up to me and was like, talking about Bodega? And I was like, yeah. He goes, I went on tour with those guys. They're pretty nice. And I died inside. Like no hate to him. And like if you're listening to this and you're a fan, cool, dude. Do whatever you want. The openers for shows, I can only imagine it has to be like a pain in the ass in the first place. Like no one knows you. You've got to go up in front of an audience waiting for the people they actually got the ticket for, and you have to be, and you're told to entertain them.
Yeah. Although on the other hand, I've seen some like incredible openers, sometimes that I like even more than the main band that I'm seeing, and so that's been really cool.
Oh yeah, totally. So what was it? I had another thought about Parcels. So did you out of the rest of the songs, were you paying attention to like what songs they're playing? I saw that in their description of the video they had like timestamps with all the songs that they played.
Overall, I wasn't really paying attention to like specific song titles. Something about this whole live album is that almost all of it just completely flows together.
I think there's only breaks in it like every 15 minutes.
Yeah, right. And so that made it a little bit hard for me to like pick up on certain tracks, but besides for like the I Know How I Feel, kind of like Triage, which I really, really love. I also really liked their last one. I think it's called Tied Up Right Now. I think it's their most popular song.
Yeah, it is.
It's just so catchy. It's so good.
Oh yeah, it's a total earworm. Like it'll totally catch you. I'm pretty sure. Jared shouted her out a handful of times, but Mariah got that stuck in her head, and then it got into her husband's head, and then it was just like an endless cycle of Tied Up Right Now in their household for a few months.
Which is also my household.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
But I should learn it on guitar and just like start playing it and hear it through the walls and just make them go crazy.
Dude, and like how they play guitar too, that's something worth pointing out. Like there's so many different ways of playing guitar that make it sound totally like tonally different. This is like oh, why is it, his name escaping me? Not now Rogers? Now Riches? The celebration guy. I'm totally forgetting. He featured on Daft Punk's latest album with on Get Lucky and Lose Yourself to Dance. But he's a classic guitarist, and their style is so up that alley of like 70s sort of funk. It's so fun to listen to. Let me see here. Now Rogers. That's it. I was right. But it just sounds so groovy, you know? And it's taking bits and pieces from a handful of different genres, and like people joke about them looking like the Beatles, but they're taking pieces from that. They're taking pieces from like Earth, Wind and Fire.
Yeah.
It's all over the place, but it works.
They make it their own, and it becomes unique. And so it's very cool.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's something with like we were talking about earlier, like with Metronomy, the rotation of style, like everything will come back eventually. Like whether or not you're creative with it is up to you. Like the sounds might be similar, but like you've definitely heard of a Midnight City by M83.
Yeah.
That album it's on, like it's very 80s, and that artist he was born in the 80s, and like it's not, but it doesn't sound like anything from that era. It sounds like the romantic remembrance of that era, but not anything that actually happened then. It's all like taking stuff from the past is okay as long as you then do something interesting and aren't like blatantly copying it.
That's true.
Like I was listening one time when I was at my parents' house, and I was listening to Metronomy. And I think Lately Going Spare came on. And my mom looked at me and she went, "This sounds like shitty Duran Duran." I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can rub people the wrong way if they're like from the era that it's kind of trying to replicate. And it's just like, there is a certain band. Have you heard of Greta Van Fleet?
Oh yeah. They sound like a B-side for a Led Zeppelin album.
Right, exactly. So it's like, to some people, it's either Greta Van Fleet or Greta Van Fleet, I don't know. But it's just like, to people who grew up with Led Zeppelin, listening to them will be like, oh, who are these like shitty copycats? But then people who like didn't grow up with Led Zeppelin, they think that they're like the original. So it's like interesting to kind of see that discrepancy between people that like grew up at a certain age, and whether they can appreciate musicians trying to replicate a certain sound.
Hey, and I listened when Greta Van Fleet got their first like little EP of a few songs. I listened to it and I was like, hey, this is cool. Like, they sound like Led Zeppelin, but I mean, we'll see what happens when they release a full album. And they released a full album, and it sounded exactly like Led Zeppelin still. And I think, dude, continuing, like, definitely not a 0 on Pitchfork, but I'm pretty sure Pitchfork gave it like a 0. Like
Sure they did.
I remember listening to a podcast where they were talking about that. Like the reason they listened to Greta Van Fleet was because they saw a really scathing Pitchfork review about Greta Van Fleet. It's fascinating how interpretation works in music.
Yeah. Like, take it all with a grain of salt, because, you know, like with Metronomy Forever, it's like, you love that album, I am not a big fan of that album. Doesn't make it a bad or like a good album, you know.
Nothing's objective.
Everything is it's all subjective when it comes to music, which is why it's cool that we're doing this podcast, because we both have like we kind of listen to different things in music.
Yeah. So just like in this week's stuff I sent to you, I was like, cool. Metronomy and Oscar Cash Forever. I was like, he's probably gonna like Oscar Cash Forever more, knowing your taste. And then sending Loud Minds, I was like, this is like a 50-50 shot. Like it might work, but maybe not. I'm glad you liked it though.
Yeah, I did like it.
Sweet. So yeah, I guess we'll call that a pod.
All right, that's a pod.
that's a podcast. So next week we're gonna be Avi's gonna be sending me a handful of stuff, and I'll be talking about what I liked about it. So we'll be back then. Avi, you want to plug any of your stuff?
No, I'll pass.
All right.
Okay, if you want to check out, I have an Instagram called Lemon Leaf. Check it out. I've got some stuff on there. If not, it's all good.
Sweet. You can find me at Old Heart Radio on Instagram, Old Heart in Space on Twitter, and then my personal Instagram is Casserole, CASSOLROLL. Give me a follow if you just want to see me fuck around on a daily basis. All right. Sweet. Well, thanks for joining me, Avi.
See you later, guys.
All right. Talk to y'all later.